Welcome to GreenSong's Changemaker series, episode 6. I can't believe that it's already been 6 weeks of this wonderful information and educational series. I'm your co-host, Alexian, along with Grandmother Elspeth. She'll be along in just a second. As always, it's my pleasure to continue to stream this live from Orlando, Florida. But we have a favor to ask. I've been asking every week. Please share this video. Share this video with your friends and family of like mind, that it's happening right now. This is a live broadcast, and we would love for you to get other people watching with you. Also, Anita is standing by in the chat room. So if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Facebook, there's comment section below. That comment section is a chat room now, and you are encouraged to comment and interact with us, because this is live, folks. This is live. So Anita's going to be able to actually take some of those messages that you post and put them right up on the screen live right here in the broadcast. If you are watching on YouTube, GreenSong is trying to grow their YouTube subscribers. So please, first of all, like this video, because it helps to drive it up in the algorithm and suggest it automatically to other people. Also, of course, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, and ring our bell. That little bell there, that's the notification bell, so that every time we're doing a live broadcast or a new video is actually posted to the feed, you'll get a little ding, and it'll remind you, oh yeah, it's time for GreenSong. I should also mention that there is an auction happening, and you can also make donations at greensongfestival.com. That's greensongfestival.com. And without delay, it is my pleasure to once again welcome Grandmother Elspeth.
Welcome once more to the Changemaker series. I'm Grandmother Elspeth, and I'm here to welcome you to the first session in December. I hope your month is beginning beautifully and will continue. We are here tonight for a couple of very exciting things. A teacher like you may never have met, and a musician that is absolutely spectacular. The focus of tonight's presentation is nonviolent communication. Pete Seeger once said, "It is very important to learn to talk to people you disagree with." The important part of that is learn to talk with people you disagree with. It's a learning process. It doesn't come easy. And I am welcoming tonight Chris Largent, who will be speaking on nonviolent communication. He has taught clear thinking, philosophy, and comparative religion at universities for 40 years, while also doing communication and conflict resolution training in government and in business. Chris has written 5 books. He is a master dream interpreter and a transformative and transforming astrologer. Chris now runs a classical academy for adults in southeastern Pennsylvania. Shall we welcome here tonight Chris Largent, speaking on nonviolent communication.
Hi team, my name is Chris Largent. I'm here to talk about conflict resolution, and obviously I'm not going to be able to do a communication and conflict resolution training in 45 minutes, but there are things that I can do to focus on how it's much easier for us to deal with issues that are tense and unhappy and so on, especially these days when there's a lot of tension going around in the society. So I want to focus on a number of points, and to do that, I'm going to do some little bit of a screen share here to have a look at notes that I would have been using for GreenSong. So I'm hoping you can all see this little baby. I'm going to move it into the center here. One of the things I want to point out is that when we're dealing with communication and conflict resolution, it's not just to get along with people. And in fact, the assumption that we should get along with everyone all the time is a very peculiar one. It's not the sort of thing that's very realistic either. But what's really happening here is there's something deeply philosophical going on, something deeply metaphysical or spiritual, however we want to talk about it. And what's happening is that we're dealing with the power of consciousness. Every time we engage consciously, clearly, alertly, awarely, if there's a word like awarely or alertly, I'm not sure. But every time consciousness is focused that way, we're tapping into this huge power of consciousness in terms of the whole. This is really ancient teaching, been around for a very long time. And it gives a kind of background for when we're doing, I mean, let's face it, conflict resolution. Because look, conflict resolution is not fun. It's something that's a real pain in the neck. And you think, oh, God, I got to slog through this one, right? But what's really happening here is in the bigger picture, there's this huge consciousness power that is being focused in that moment, and it's changing collective awareness. And I want to add something to this, because it's this point that's right here in the first one, the consciousness power that comes from the whole of being itself. When we tap into it, when we're involved, including all kinds of unpleasant things like conflict resolution, but whenever we're involved in any kind of consciousness focus that way, or consciousness exercise. Now, the point about the earth, the expression, the smartest person in the room is the earth. We're learning more and more about that as researchers study the microbiome and find out there are what are called germs or viruses or whatever you want to call them all over the planet. And they have been, in a sense, responsible for maintaining, developing, and evolving life all over the planet. The Earth has this brilliant way of maintaining and developing life. So what's happening is that in addition to tapping into the power of consciousness, when we're working with communication very consciously, or working with conflict resolution, we're also working with the Earth in terms of the development of what's happening on the planet at the time. So that's the first point. Now, the skills for developing this higher consciousness power are usually the communication, conflict resolution skills that we're going to talk about today. There's a whole range here, but I want to keep in focus that this varies from individual to individual. So what's happening is people can use anything they want. Sometimes there's this idea that all of us should do meditation, okay? I used to teach meditation for decades. It's a wonderful thing, but we don't all have to do it. There can be something like contemplation, prayer, rituals that people do, whatever it is. Everything from that to dialogue, the sorts of things that are going to engage this consciousness power. And in terms of communication and conflict resolution, the things I'm going to talk about briefly today are the most famous communication kind of training on the planet, NVC, nonviolent communication, from the late Marshall Rosenberg. The Harvard Negotiation Project, led by Bill Urey and his team, including Douglas Stone, Ruth Patton, and Sheila Heen, is also a source for this. And back in the day, Bill Urey wrote books called things like Getting to Yes and Getting Past No, I think. And then the Conflict Partnership Catalyst Process, the CPC by Dudley Weeks, who's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. And I want to just summarize this in saying, as we engage in any of these, we're changing the world. We are changing collective awareness. In other words, if we're engaging in something, and again, I'm going to focus on conflict resolution as being hard work. As we're engaging in this, what's going on is we're changing the world. We're impacting the lives of people that we'll never meet, even though it's not clear how we're going to do this. And the reason I'm saying that is it's not clear how we're going to do this. We don't get immediate feedback from it, right? If we change the world, the whole world doesn't send us an email and say, hey, by the way, you just changed my life, thanks. But that is what's happening. And again, this is a very old philosophical teaching. So let's start with Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication. There are lots of trainings that Marshall did that are on the web that you can look up on YouTube and so on. And it's fun to watch Marshall work. But there are general things we want to just think about. And that is, Marshall always emphasized listening and speaking without these things. And before I go to those, I want to notice the listening piece. That is, in our culture, although when we were going through school, we were programmed to listen, we listened very selectively. We were listening more or less for the right answer. The problem with listening for the right answer is that we don't listen openly, and we don't listen from the heart. That's one of the things that the old Native societies that I used to work with would emphasize, would say, look, you have to listen in this big, whole, open way. And by the way, it takes the brain 4 to 5 seconds to process anything that's said. And the reason that impacts listening is that a lot of times if I'm listening for the right answer, or the other part is I'm listening to give a response. And we'll talk about the kinds of responses here in a minute. If I'm doing that, often my brain will start to come up with, it'll start to get busy. So my mind will start to come up with an answer within a couple of seconds. And yet, I haven't really taken in what's been said. So I'm grasping at little snippets of the thing and trying to come up with a response and formulate something appropriate. It's no wonder we have conflict resolution going on. So the first thing is listening, and listening carefully, quietly, and with our whole beings, right? Okay, Marshall would emphasize, then speak without these things: judgment, blame, accusation, criticism, evaluation, demands. Evaluation always gets questions when I'm teaching on the list, because people say, I'm not allowed to evaluate things. I have to evaluate things, don't I? Yeah, that's not what he's talking about. This whole list has to do with invading somebody's space. When I am speaking and I'm passing a judgment, a negative judgment on things, and I don't mean the kind of judgments that, I have to have good judgment about where I'm going to go to dinner because I have good food there. Yeah. I don't mean that. I mean the kind of thing where I'm passing some kind of judgment on some person. And let's face it, I'm not the whole of being. I'm not God. None of us is. So we can skip the judgments. Right? That's Marshall's take. Judgments are usually some version of blame or accusation. We can speak about how we feel about something. But when we start to blame or accuse people, we're in serious trouble. It doesn't mean that the person doesn't have to take responsibility for something. There's a huge difference between blame and responsibility. And so what happens here is, what Marshall's trying to emphasize for people is, try to just talk about what's going on. It's very empirical. In that sense, it's very much like what the Confucians, the Taoists, and especially the Buddha would say. Stick with what's going on right at the moment. Don't add things to it. And when we're blaming and accusing and negatively criticizing especially, we are adding something to what's happening. We don't want to do that. So, and especially down here in the criticism piece, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to give positive feedback and so on. And affirming people can be a good thing. However, we have to be careful about this. What's going on is that if you think of, it's Alfie Kohn, the famous teacher who's written a lot of books on education. Alfie Kohn has a book called Punished by Rewards. I think the subtitle is something like A's, Praise, Gold Stars, and Other Bribes. What he found out was, when people are criticizing and evaluating, if it doesn't come from inside, if people aren't saying, okay, I've mastered this skill or this discipline, I'm engaging in this, and it's working, I can see the positive feedback I'm getting, the method, and I appreciate that. If it doesn't come from the inside, if something's coming from the outside, it tends to destroy motivation. We know that about children from a lot of studies that Alfie Kohn summarized in that book. So when we're working with someone, and especially, hey, by the way, I forgot this. I was a business consultant, still am occasionally, just mostly small businesses, occasionally large ones. And the other thing that was discovered is, you know how businesses will do those evaluations at the end of the year, how did you do and so on. Well, those are terrible ideas. Usually people are making judgments about things that they can't really understand. Sometimes the person himself or herself can't understand what kind of year the work year turned out to be. And I had very fortunate. I had this fabulous contract to study corporations that help people get out of poverty, work well with low-income employees. And so I got to study some of the best corporations in the country. And I thought, well, there's so many nasty ones that you hear about that it'd be great if people realized how wonderful these are. And almost invariably, the companies that I studied didn't do these employee evaluations. Rather, they would get together as a kind of team and say, okay, how do you think we did? How do you think you did? What are your goals? How'd you for next year? What were your goals for this year? How did you do with reaching them? It had these open discussions. And if people said, look, I think I need help with something, they'd offer the help, right? So even that is something that, to not do, and especially demands. Demands are tricky because what happens is we do have certain expectations for the way we're going to interact with people and the way the world works. On the other hand, a demand is still invading somebody's space, right? The easiest way to think about it is old native societies, you had this very, Marshall would say, very nonviolent approach. In fact, Rupert Ross, who's a Crown prosecutor for Canada, used to do lots of cases with native peoples and took a year off to study the Hallawada and Ojibwe Cree community. And he was astonished as he said, he wrote 2 books, Dancing with a Ghost and Returning to the Teachings. And he was astonished when in the books, when he'd say how violent our language is when we're interacting in where he was stationed in Toronto. Now, I've taught in Toronto. Canadians are very polite people, but what Rupert Ross noticed was when he was with the native people, they don't ask direct questions. They don't make these judgments. They don't make these evaluations. They don't put the person on the spot. They tend to back off, and their approaches are very indirect. There's a kind of example that turns up, and I used it in a book I wrote. I once actually, in a fit of questionable taste, wrote a book set in the 11th century where the main character visits the Micmac in America. And what happens is he discovers that they have this very indirect approach to things and very negative on putting anybody on the spot. So the conversation goes something like this, I think, that I've reproduced. The kid wants to learn to wants to learn to fish. And so he goes to this person that everybody says that's the master fisherman, right? So he goes to the person and he has to do this very indirect approach, would be something like this. There's somebody here that might want to learn to fish. And he leaves it that way. If the master fisherman doesn't want to respond, he just walks away. The master fisherman, though, might respond with saying, well, if there's someone here who wants to learn to fish, there might be someone here who wants to teach that person to fish. And the other person might say, the kid might say, well, if there's someone who might want to teach that, I wonder how that might be arranged, how that might happen. And the teacher then might say, it's his schedule. That might happen if that person met down at the lake this evening after dinner, and so on. You had this very stepped back approach to things. Similarly, even things like knocking on the door or calling somebody on the phone. In old traditional societies, especially the indigenous ones, you didn't knock on the door, you just stood outside, made noise. And then if people wanted to let you in, they'd let you in. If they didn't, they wouldn't. And you just walk away thinking, okay, it's not appropriate for me to be interacting with that person now. So that's the kind of thing that Marshall was trying to do with nonviolent communication. And the interesting thing is, he would say, okay, look, what you really want to speak for, what you really want to talk about is, you want to just give people your observations. You're speaking to say, this is what I observe, this is what I see, this is what I'm experiencing. And that's why it's very empirical. It's just reporting on what's happening, right? I don't remember what book it is. Stranger in a Strange Land, maybe? Anyway, there's a character in this book that I ran into when I was in college. Really interesting because the character was absolutely empirical. And so somebody asked the character, for instance, what color is the house in the distance? And the person said, the 2 sides facing me are white, right? And wow, that's about as empirical as it gets, you know? So that's the kind of thing that Marshall was talking about. Try to stick strictly to, this is what I'm observing. And the same with expressing feelings, saying, okay, this is the way I'm feeling about this, or this is the emotion that I'm having, or I'm feeling such and such. Not you caused me or you made me, but this is how I feel, right? The same with expressing needs rather than demands or direct requests that might put the person on the spot, saying, I have a need for, or I need this, right? Especially then when you're asking a question, asking for feedback, asking for concrete action, or asking for whatever the practical is going to be in this case. And it's asking in a way that is kind of open about it. So a lot of times Marshall would say, someone could say, well, could we do this as a concrete practical response? And the other person's free to say, no, I can't do that. And then it's this very clean, sort of clear interaction. So that's roughly Marshall. And again, there are tons of things on the web about nonviolent communication. When it comes to conflict resolution, there are a couple of things here that I think are pretty useful. Dudley Weeks is someone who was raised in a family that had in a neighborhood that was very divisive, and I'll pass over the details. And so he wrote a book called The 8 Essential Steps to Conflict Resolution, which is really good. And he has done a lot of trainings on that. I don't know whether he's still doing trainings. And what happened was that when Dudley started thinking about conflict, he realized people kind of think, okay, I had this relationship, whatever it is, professional, personal, family, romantic, whatever. I had this relationship, and all of a sudden the whole relationship becomes the conflict. So in a sense, the relationship disappears in the conflict. And he realized that's not true. What's really happening is the relationship is going through this shift, this change. And when it's going through that, sort of interestingly enough, sort of like disease, right? I don't know whether you know, but the physician Larry Dossey always said disease is something that means your body's trying to jump up a level. And now that we are studying the microbiome of the planet, we're finding out that's really true. So we kind of think really goofy ways about disease these days. But what Dudley was saying was, it's when you're involved in this conflict, the relationship can now then jump up a level, right? I happen to be in a new relationship now for the last year or so, and what she always says is, well, you know, we do run into roadblocks here and there, but, or what does she say, bumps in the road, but we're good at slogging through it. I think, yeah, okay. It doesn't feel that way at the time, you know, but once you get on the other side, you think, oh, that's really good. Dudley was the one who made good points about this. He said, first of all, keep in mind that you don't lose the relationship, you have a conflict partnership. And that's what he calls this, the conflict partnership catalyst process. And if you read the 8 Essential Steps to Conflict Resolution, they're really, really, really good, because he will say, go look in the relationship at what is still there. And what you notice, the things that are still in the relationship that aren't involved in the conflict are things that you say, well, here's something we can build on. And then building on that, you establish doables. Dudley is fairly sure that the word doables was coined by him when he was first dealing with the conflict partnership, conflict resolution process. And he was always pointing out that, you know, start with any kind of conflict, start with a doable. What's something that you two can accomplish together? What's some way in which you can work together? And the interesting thing about that is it's much easier to build on that than it is to say, we need to solve this whole thing right now. And usually, as Dudley pointed out, the whole thing seems so overwhelming that there's no way that the conflict itself is going to be resolved just that thing. It's rather saying, let's get these two parties together. Let's realize that they're now in a conflict partnership. They're developing conflict resolution skills, and they're going to have those skills out the other end to use for the next time they run into this. And that's a really key and important point to make, because usually what happens in the culture is, especially since the 90s, I was sort of surprised, and we were talking about it recently in a seminar here, that in the 90s, there started to be this idea, I mean, these people would come on television and argue about politics, films, whatever, the culture, and that's supposed to be interaction, as if an argument is fundamentally a good way of interacting. I think, No, it really isn't. It sets up all kinds of tensions. But more importantly, it puts everybody on the spot, and it starts to involve, and we'll talk about this for with the Harvard Negotiation Project in a minute. It starts to involve this emotional commitment to something that you're, in a sense, you're being pushed to emotionally commit to something. And that's a bit of a problem, because what happens here is that of the 6 intelligences that we have, the emotional is the one that can get revved up the most when things get irrational. By the way, 6 intelligences, just as a quick note, we use the physical and emotional intelligence to get around on a daily basis. They're very bright, they're very smart, and they take care of all kinds of things. I drove here, I live in a log cabin up on a hill, and I drove here in my car. And when I'm driving, I make an emotional commitment to get here without running over people in the street or whatever. I'm playing bumper cars with my friends. And the physical intelligence kicks in from that emotional intelligence commitment and gets me here, no problem. As I'm going, what's going to happen is the 2 intellectual intelligences, that is the analytic and synthesizing mind. The analytic is the one that breaks things into pieces so we can understand it, or filters out what we don't want. And then gives it to the synthesizing mind and says, what sense does this make, right? And then the top 2, the 2 that are related most to the whole, or to the spiritual, to the mystical, whatever we want to say about that, are the imaginal and the intuitive. And what we notice is that the imaginal and the intuitive are kind of beaten up in the 20th century. They were not taken very seriously. It's only recently that we realized the power of the creative imagination, even though Max Planck, the very famous Nobel Prize winning physicist who started all the quantum stuff, in a famous essay said, the creative imagination is where we have to start with giving ourselves a world picture. What's the image that's going on out there? And the intuition and fills in the patterns within that whole. So the creative imagination will get activated. Well, let's say the imagination will get activated when we say, listen to a beautiful piece of music, see a beautiful sunset, sunrise, see a gorgeous film, fall in love, and so on. In the creative imagination, when we go with that, we develop this world picture. And that world picture tells us what kind of world we live in. Well, in the 90s, we started thinking this is a world that's of war. People argue all the time. Television shows started this endless good versus evil stuff. So passing over all the discussions on that, the point was that our creative imagination, which could give us a world that's beautiful, whole, natural, and has imbalances, has poisons in it. And we've got to work with those. We've got to kind of right that ship a little bit. So what happens is that that's a very different from thinking we're in a battlefield or a war or something like that. Now, the actual facts of where we are, if you're saying, well, sociologically, where are we? Well, then you drop down to the intellect and ask that question. But the creative imagination has to give us a picture of something that we can, a big vision for our lives, let's say, an image that allows us to be functional. So that if I fall into a relationship and I suddenly think it's a battle in the whole, and the creative imagination, the image I'm carrying around, contrary to my creative imagination, is that it is a battle, then it's hard to get out of that conflict, because the conflict is going to seem normal. And by the way, that can happen with people. I mean, we can't get along with everybody. Jung pointed that out. I mean, I don't know whether you guys know, but Carl Jung in his 30s discovered astrology. And he was very excited about it, because he said to Freud, this is great. We've got this tool that's a brilliant personality profile. And the first personality profile, Myers-Briggs, came from the Myers-Briggs mother-daughter team studying Jung. So this personality profile, and he was realizing this can help me understand what my clients are going through, but understanding the people they will get along with and the people they won't get along with. As a good example, the Greeks would have airy and fiery people. There's a good example. Or earthy and watery people, right? Those are 4 elements that the Greeks used for personalities. So for instance, my joke always is, because I had to give a talk once and study the founders of the American Republic, that nobody had any business putting Alexander Hamilton, this very practical, earthy person, in the room with Thomas Jefferson, this very fiery person, and expect them to get along, right? Publicly, they fought like crazy. They respected each other, but they fought a lot. And so what happens is you think, okay, we don't have to get along with everybody, but the fact that I don't get along with everybody doesn't mean that it's a war zone. It doesn't mean that's the image I have to carry around, because if I do, then I cannot get out of the conflict problem. I can't actually resolve a conflict. So Dudley Weeks is thinking about all of this in his work. And so when he is dealing with a conflict, he says, these are the things in his conflict partnership catalyst. And again, I would recommend the 8 essential steps to conflict resolution. But here, what he says is, try these strategies. And he says, focus on the broad context as much as possible. Again, if I have a relationship and there's a partnership going on, and that partnership is expansive in many ways, most of our relationships have big implications. If I focus on that, I will see the whole relationship. So I won't see this one conflict as destroying the whole relationship. So in any kind of situation, communication, especially conflict, focus on the broad context, make it as big as possible. And within that context, focus on constructive connectors. These are the doables that he's talking about. What are the things that we can do together? What are the ways we can work? So for instance, one of the things that I will notice in, especially in conflictual situations, is that often the doable has to do with some little task we perform together, or something like a joke, humor. Humor can be something that's a constructive connector, because if people start laughing, it breaks the mesmerism of the conflict often. Then within that broad context, try to clarify as much as possible. Often in conflicts, there's just something that isn't clear. There isn't something that is relevant. Lots of times behind the scenes, there will be all these issues going on. And people notice that. That's why therapists stay in business. People will say, well, I think this is a presenting problem, only to discover there's something behind that. Interesting thing, there was a book, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Undefended Love by 2 female psychologists, Jet Saris and Marlena Lyons, I'm pretty sure. And at the end of the original version, I don't think the revised version still has it, but at the end of the original version, they give these cases that they would have. These couples would come in with presenting cases, and the couples would be, kind of bang their heads against each other. But what the psychologists discovered is almost always 90+% of the time, behind that presenting issue was something from a wound from earlier in adulthood or childhood or something like that. They're unresolved traumas. Now, most of us have heard a lot about that, so it makes sense. But this is the kind of thing to keep in mind, that lots of times, if we clarify within that broader context, we'll discover that there's something else going on with the conflict. Then Dudley says, develop a secure I, a secure you, and a secure we. We have to have this sense that we are not being attacked. We have to have this sense that we have a ground to stand on. We have to have a sense that we are valued by ourselves or the other person. That's why if we go back to, Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, if I'm in a situation where there's constant blame and accusation and judgment, then I'm not going to feel very secure here, right? And allowing the other person to feel secure to try to build that up too. And then a sense that we as a relationship, that also has some kind of security. Again, the broad context will often help. Then he says, focus on what needs to be done, what can be done, and how to do it. So lots of times the things that need to be done can't be done right away. So you have to put them off. Start with the smaller things to work to the bigger. Start with the easier ones to work with the more complicated, challenging ones. So what can be done, and then how we do it. The focus on methods. This becomes critically important because in classical academies, I run a classical academy, and classical academies, East and West, used to have this notion that don't focus on the stuff, the content, the what, the person, you did this, you did that. Focus on methods, focus on how. And so that if something doesn't work, you don't say, oh, I failed. That's not going to get you very far. Say, okay, that method didn't work. The method I used didn't work. Let me try a different one. So there's the focus here on how, right? And once you have that how, it's along with what can be done. Then he says, you're developing an effective process. And so you get conscious, that's what you're doing. And it produces effective outcomes. That you keep applying that and applying that and applying that. it will finally lead to something. I was watching a movie that somebody recommended called The Best of Enemies. It's based on a true story where this white Ku Klux Klan guy and this African-American female leader of her community kind of came into conflict all the time. And they invited this African-American conflict resolution expert down to work with them. And I was amazed at how good that guy was in very frustrating circumstances. But he was kind of doing exactly what Dudley Weeks is suggesting here, and especially developing a process would produce effective outcomes no matter how minor. And that's a good example of that. The other thing I want to point out is from the Harvard Negotiation Project. Bruce Patton, Sheila Heen, and Doug Stone wrote a book called Difficult Conversations. And they made 3 points in there that are relevant to the way we interact with people. And when you have a conversation that gets difficult right away, usually there are 3 roots of it, they said. The first is people get attached to being right or being clear. I'm being clear about this. Why doesn't that person understand what I'm saying? What's wrong with them, right? You hear the accusation. What really happens is we're usually the least clear when we think we're the most clear. This is something that I used to lead communication trainings with because I hadn't seen it anyplace, but it was an implication of everything I had read. If I'm clear about something, how did I get clear? Asking questions is really important in any kind of intellectual process or intuitive process or any of the other intelligences, right? How did I get here? Well, my clarity means I process this over time. It's processed on all the intelligences. That is, my intellect says, okay, I understand this. And then physical and emotional give me the experiences. And then the imaginal and intuitive give me this sense of how this whatever I'm clear about, this big insight, this new method, this new skill, this new understanding, whatever it is, how that functions in my life. So it's this great, big, wonderful thing that I've spent a lot of time on. Well, what's going to happen is if I'm talking to someone, they're not going to get that. It's almost as if I had this whole book length experience of understanding what I now feel clear about, okay, I got it now, or wow, or an aha. And I deliver it to the other person. Instead of the book, they get an email, a short email, or worse, a text, right? And so what happens is a lot of times they don't have the big context. Go back to the big context here of Dudley Weeks. They don't have the big context that I have, when I've been incorporating and understanding this and learning it. They don't have that. So a lot of times I think I just expressed it really clearly. Why didn't that person get it? Yeah, they don't have the book. They just got the text. So a lot of times it's not being attached to being right or being clear, saying this is going to take some time. Clarity is going to take some dialogue. The other thing that happens is when people say, I'm committed to this idea. Nothing wrong with commitment. What usually happens, though, is if we get emotionally attached to what we say, it can very easily lead to a difficult conversation. One of the interesting things, when I first started studying, my undergraduate work was in comparative religion. I loved the myths and rituals, the old traditions and so on. When I started to do graduate work in philosophy, it was a bit of a head bender, right? But what I noticed, what I liked about it very much, is there's this philosophical tradition that says, you're free to talk about anything, put any position out there. And in Plato's academy, a lot of times, Plato would do this himself, but after Plato was gone, a person stand up and say, okay, here's this position, here's this argument, and present it. And people think about it. And next day, the same person put the exact opposite position or argument out. And people would think about that. And that's one of the things that you notice in societies that have this very creative element to them. And what you notice about the founding of America, there are lots of huge disagreements in public. And it made the public very sharp, very bright, very smart, right? Because they had to think about both, like, okay, how do I understand this? And so this business of being emotionally committed can be wonderful. But if I'm emotionally attached, let's think about the Buddhist sense of it. If I'm emotionally attached to what I'm saying and some particular outcome of the conversation, it can get me into trouble. The worst of this, Doug Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen would say, is that this might be right or my whole world is wrong. In other words, I even attach my identity to what I'm saying. Did you ever wonder if you hear about the wars of religion, and of course, teaching the history of religions is something I would run into. If you look at the wars of religion, the weird thing about it is that people were willing to kill each other just because they're a different religion. Does that make any sense? That you go to a different church or read a different book or have different religious rituals, so let's go kill that person? I mean, really, on the face of it, it sounds crazy. What's going on here, these three are saying, is if I'm absolutely committed to what I'm saying in the sense that my identity is attached to it, then my identity gets attached to it. It gets to be a dogma. And if that dogma is attacked, I feel as if I'm being attacked or my life is being threatened. So we hear how in difficult conversations, these authors are saying, don't get too attached to being right or being clear. Be willing to have a dialogue about it. Don't let your emotions start clouding things in here. And if they are, express clearly what you're feeling emotionally so that the other person knows and make that part of the conversation. That would be a Marshall Rosenberg point. Or, for heaven's sakes, be very careful about something you attach your identity to, right? In classical, and it's interesting, people struggle with this one, but in classical training, classical philosophy, classical spiritual teachings, especially people like the Buddha and so on, and classical science, there is no fixed idea. There's a famous debate between Cicero, the famous Roman philosopher Cicero, and his son, where his son has joined an Aristotelian school, because Aristotle is the one who gives us, you have to be right, you have to have a position, your position has to beat the other, it's one-upping. That's Aristotle. Plato wasn't like that. Plato and Socrates were the opposite. And so if you're classically trained the way I was, you don't have fixed ideas, you don't have fixed beliefs, you don't have fixed anything. And Cicero's son doesn't know what to make of that. And we wouldn't either, because our school system is very Aristotelian. You have to have the right answer so you can get the right grades, so you can go to the right school, so you can get the right job, so you can have the right life. This is all Aristotle, right? And probably somebody older than he was. So he got it from somebody. Well, actually, Aristotle was a courtier. His father was a court physician to Philip of Macedon. And so he was raised at court. And that's the way a courtier thinks. I have to have the right position so I can move up. Well, that's fine if you're at court, but not so good if you're living in a normal culture, right? So what happens here is this notion that we have that in some way I have to be right. No, Cicero says to his son, if I don't have any fixed ideas or fixed beliefs, I'm free to take on anyone I want. I can assume this for today, and if it works out, great. In fact, I used to announce to my students, I used to say, I'm classically trained, no fixed beliefs, no fixed opinions, in fact, no beliefs at all, unless you're talking about it in some different way. And then they would say, well, you mean you don't believe the sun will rise tomorrow? And I'd say, okay, that's very sloppy talking, because what happens is all of us assume. We don't believe, we assume the sun will rise tomorrow. And if it doesn't, like good little scientists, we'll go to try to find out why. If we had a real belief, a fixed belief about that, if the sun didn't rise, we'd do what this person does, says, my whole world must be wrong. And people go jump off things after that, right? Or they go shoot somebody. This is not a good thing. So it's being very light. And this is a Buddhist point on what I want to attach my identity to. The final thing that I think would be really useful comes from the levels of dialogue. Lots of people talk about this. This is David Bohm's version. David Bohm, B-O-H-A-M, is you probably know, the famous physicist, because a new biography of David Bohm just came out. He died at the end of last century. And he used to have all those conversations and dialogues with Krishnamurti. So Bohm would say, usually what we think is dialogue is some kind of discussion, and it's really a kind of debate or argument. He said, let's keep in mind that discussion and concussion have the same root, and it's this, right? And that might be entertaining if you're looking to beat your head against something or to have a debate with somebody or an argument with somebody. But he said very little is going to be accomplished here. Except sharpening debate skills, for instance, which can be fine. That's perfectly okay. This is a non-judgmental approach to it. But he said, if you want to start doing dialogue, what you have to do is you have to jump a level, which means we start to have to inquire. I think I got the English wrong there. We have to start inquiring into our own position and the other person's position. And the other person has to be willing to do the same. That's why David Bohm says sometimes at this level, what you're going to need is a referee, someone that helps you do this. But if you can objectively start inquiring, that becomes really, really, really useful. Because once I'm inquiring to my own and the other person's position, then we start thinking about how we got there and what's going on. And in a short time, we get into this dance of dialogue. And we've all had those conversations where we just seem to go back and forth and have these wonderful insights and we're feeding each other. And that's true dialogue. And this becomes really, really, really important because in communication and conflict resolution, the more we have those experiences of dialogue, the more we're going to say, yes, that's what I'm aiming for. And so I'm going to use these tools, right? And I'm going to make a couple of just general points. And the first is to remind ourselves that we're not going to get along with everybody. There are going to be conflicts. And that doesn't mean that it's a failure. That means it's a challenge to rise to the next level of understanding how to resolve a conflict. Similarly, in communication, if something goes wrong, don't think, okay, I failed, I'm a disaster, or that person's a jerk. To say, okay, how do I go to the next level? And so I want to make that point. A second point is there's a body language expert named Joe Navarro, former FBI agent, and Joe has taken time to write a book called Dangerous Personalities because he ran into people in his work who, when it came to conflict resolution or communication, they were war people. And so I think these days, I think the first personality, for instance, he has in the book is a narcissist. And you have a lot about narcissists on the web these days. The reason I'm bringing that up is sometimes you'll run into people who they're in a phase, or this is their personality, where blame, accusation, criticizing, being at war with people, that's what they do all the time. They're relentless. And in that case, it's better to just back off. We used to have a joke about this when I was teaching Confucianism, because there would be in Confucian and Neo-Confucian ideas, if you can't get along with a person, give it distance. So for instance, I have a brother who is a Christian conservative, right? Bright guy. My sister is a liberal New Age Democrat. I am a sometimes political consultant with no party affiliations, because if you're a consultant and have party affiliations, you're not going to get the big jobs, right? Or any jobs for that matter, unless you're consulting for a party. And so we get along at a distance, right? He lives in California, she lives in someplace like Georgia, and I live in Pennsylvania, right? And we talk about general things that we don't ever have to, clash over. And so it makes it very easy. We allow that Confucian distance. Well, if you run into these war or attacking people, the distance is often running the other way. That can happen. The third point comes from William Ury at the Harvard Negotiation Project. He used to say, if you're really in trouble, have a fallback position. And the best fallback position for some active response is start asking questions. I'll give you an example. I had this job, a hopeless job. The Labor Department, and that is one of the places where your tax dollars are well spent in the government, talk about overworked, underpaid people. The Labor Department was all over in all the states. They're starting to computerize job hunting. And what was happening was the people who were interviewing, the people coming in for job hunting, they're already overwhelmed. They don't want to stop and enter things on a computer. So the states weren't doing it. And a bunch of us consultants were sent in to get the states to do it. Well, think of it, what an awful job this is. A bunch of outside consultants are going to come in and tell these people are already overwhelmed, trying to help these poor souls who need jobs. And part of my work in the Labor Department had been helping people find jobs. So I knew what they were facing. But it's trying to have the consultants who are coming in to get people to start doing this computer programming. I mean, this computer program, the way the programming had been set up, they had to enter certain things at the end of each client. We're not going to be all that terribly popular, right? So I was hired just to say, try to help us get along with people. And there was one place that this very brilliant staff, and it was in Philadelphia, and quite brilliant, and led by this African-American woman. And when we came in from the outside, they were not happy to see us. And for about the first 45 minutes, I thought, we're not going to get anywhere here. And then I remembered Bill Ury's fallback. Start asking questions and just keep asking questions. Ask questions relentlessly until you get somewhere. That's what turned it around. Because at one point, about 45 minutes into it, the head of the project looked at me as if to say, "You're on, we are not getting anywhere here." And I just started asking this brilliant African-American woman questions about how she does it, and say, okay, now things like, how do you guys really work here that you have one of the highest rated places in the country? How do you do it? What are your approaches? What are your methods? And so on. And just kept asking her questions. In about 15 to 20 minutes, she softened and we were starting to get someplace. Asking questions can be a good fallback position. So to summarize this then, we're looking at the power of consciousness that gets focused in communication and conflict resolution. There are lots of ways that focus happens, not just communication and conflict resolution. Meditation and contemplation, for instance, can also change the world. We have an instinct about that, in fact, about the way meditation works. Otherwise, those people who live in caves for years and meditate, if we didn't think they were doing something important in consciousness, we'd tell them to get out there and get a job, right? But instead, we think that's something important. And this consciousness power is also part of the earth, right? It's part of the earth's intelligence. And one of the reasons that I was excited about GreenSong is that from what I could tell the other teachers is that you're all these geniuses in sustainability. And I thought, wow, I don't know a tenth of this stuff. I need to get there and talk to these people and figure out how to do things, right? But the earth consciousness, you're engaging with the earth's consciousness in the work that you're all doing, as nearly as I could tell. And then the conflict resolution elements with Marshall Rosenberg try to not put people on the spot and just express what's going on with you. With Dudley Weeks, have these senses of working with conflict partnerships, and with the Harvard Negotiation Project, not getting too attached to what we're saying and finding ways to get into true dialogue, and lots of times getting into true dialogue by asking questions relentlessly. Okay. So I hope this is helpful to everyone. Thanks very much for listening. And I hope we do have an in-person GreenSong, because there are a lot of you out there I would like to talk to about all the things you're doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. It gave us all something to work toward. At any rate, it's worthwhile to learn this. Tonight, in my space of time, I want to talk to you about something that is unfortunately central to many people's lives. But before I do, let me visualize 3 small bowls. In one bowl, there is salt. In one bowl, there are wheat berries. They're called berries, the seeds are. And in one bowl, there are cowrie shells, little tiny shells. Now, you might say to yourself, what's the relationship of these? What are they doing there? Why are they there? They are money in the various civilizations. Cowrie shells strung on a string used to be the medium of exchange for many of the Polynesian and other sea-based cultures. The Roman soldiers were paid in salt. It was that valuable, it still is, but we get it easier. And if you remember, in the Christian Bible, the slaves in Egypt were paid in wheat. They could take it directly, grind it, and make bread. So we're talking about money. Coined money has existed intermittently, printed by or coined by kings or different people like that, but not until a few hundred years ago did it become the sole medium of exchange. And I want to talk about making peace with money. It drives us. We never have enough. We spend it freely or we don't. but we're never calm and peaceful about it because it's what happens between us and our needs and what we can make for it. So let's think about what money does to us. Now, money is not real, it's symbolic. Look at those dollar bills or $100 bills. Look at that pile of coin. That is symbolic of your labor or somebody that gave it to you. It might be this much is worth an hour of your time. That much is what you get paid for a month. It's all about your relationship with your work and what you need or think you need to have. The first thing I will tell you, you're going to scream about. You're going to scream. It's going to be almost as bad as telling you to throw out your television set. I'm talking about cut up your credit cards. I know, I hear you. But as long as you are using credit, you have mortgaged your future. You are assuming that you will go on forever in order to pay off all of this. Whatever you're enjoying now, you've got to pay for it tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. That's one of the major things. And this is going to be this will not be as long as some of my classes. The second thing to remember is, what do you really have to have in your life? What is really vital and important? I once did some financial counseling with a young woman who said, I'm having trouble getting a job because I don't need but 20 hours work a month to meet my needs. She said, I sat down and I figured out, what do I need and how much will it cost? And I don't need but 20 hours, but I'm overqualified. And she was a trained nurse. And she said, nobody will hire me because I don't want enough money. Odd position, isn't it? At any rate, she did finally make that happen and found the ideal position for herself. So look at what you actually need in your life. You might want to add some things, but remember, you don't have to have everything you think of. And the next thing is, there are other systems than money that exchange goods and services that can be very useful and even fun. Barter, which means exchanging one thing for another thing, or a bag of potatoes for a box of strawberries, or whatever it is. Barter has been the system throughout the ages, no matter what the culture, no matter what the tribe, no matter where you are. Barter is a consistent system. It gets more and more complicated at times, depending on if you want peas for supper and the person that has the peas do not want your tomatoes, you're going to have to find a third party to go through that. But it can be done. It does not involve money, and it does not involve the government. Another system is time banking. Athens, Ohio has a very active time bank, and I know other cities that do. The way it works is, you come and sign up with whatever you do for a living, and you look for, in other words, the person that cuts your firewood receives the benefits as well as you, if you want a doctor. So you see, it means all of the work is honored and used for the benefit of the people in the time bank. Each time bank works differently. Some people can pile up hours without ever needing anything, so that when they do, they might have a quantity of hours. Look into it. It's called time banking. Those are some of the things involving money and other systems for exchanging goods and services. Now, it is my great pleasure to bring yet another of my dear friends who are marvelous musicians. S.J. Tucker is the voice of Laura at the Campfire and the sharp laughter of modern myth. She is a wisdom keeper whose concert performances run from silly to sacred and back again. Her guitar, her skillful hand drums, and her siren's compelling voice. It's a beautiful, delicate voice, but very powerful. She wields an award-winning body of original music, plugged and unplugged, known for changing lives and healing wounded hearts. She is Suge to her friends and her fans. She says she is proud to contribute to the soundtrack of our emotional, spiritual, and magical revolution, as well as evolution. Welcome, S.J. Tucker.
Walk between the worlds bravely down the candle road. The light will lead you deep into your core. Move into the center, add your sorrow to the close, with the incense rising steady as a prayer. Though the heart is heavy as the dance is burning down, may you raise your eyes and never bow your head, for we are not alone. Hi folks, S.J. Tucker here, welcoming you to this week's musical portion of GreenSong's Changemaker series. If you don't know my work, I want to welcome you twice over and let you know that you are in for some mischief-steeped music inspired by everything from rock, jazz, and folk to indie film, personal spell work that I have done, experiences in my life, and the people that I care about most in the world. For instance, Grandmother Elspeth. So I have put together what I hope you will enjoy, some of my more well-known crowd pleaser tunes, along with the newer things which blended together will hopefully invoke and honor that moment, that day when Elspeth and Pete were talking together and the seeds of GreenSong took root. Since I am pre-recorded at the festival's request tonight, just to give us all a little bit less grief where the tech side of things is concerned, it means that not only do I get to visit with you in the chat, which I'm going to try my best to be available to do, but also change costumes just in subtle ways and switch up my backdrop from time to time. I know how much of what we are able to experience lately happens online. In fact, most of it. So I want to just keep things lively in little subtle ways. I hope you enjoy that visual aspect of change as we are change makers here together tonight, as well as the musical aspect of what I got for you. Showtime. Let's go. This first song is a newer one of mine that I released as a single during the summer. You may not have heard it yet. It's called Wild Times, and it was kicked off by the Black Lives Matter protests and my support of them, as well as the sevenfold waning moon spell for magical resistance by Laura Tempest Sackroff. And if it gets stuck in your head, which I hope it will, because if it does, that means I've done my job, you may download it for the price of your choice at music.sjtucker.com. I stand between the wild and the familiar, wondering if they've always been the same. Tonight's is a moon worth drawing down. We are witches worthy of the name. Comes a gathering of signals from far and wide, little candles burning on both sides of all our dirty screens tonight. All the old familiar rhymes are not gonna fit these wild, wild times. What's familiar's gotta be run out on a rail. So let it begin right here, right now, right here, right now. Let it begin with me, oh, let it begin. Picking up the call to action. One's ready and tears held back. Let's send out everything we got. Let the blue pale before the black. Red, white, and had it up to here. Comes a gathering of signals from everywhere. Here comes that moon and the sky is clear. All the old familiar rhymes are not gonna fit these wild, wild times. What's familiar's gotta be run out on a rail. All the old familiar rhymes are not gonna fit these wild, wild times. What's familiar's gotta be run out on a rail. Darling, you are not the only one. Everything you need to feel, go ahead and feel it till it's done, and after take some time to heal. This machine and I know the work continues over time. No vacation from the lies. All the old familiar rhymes do not suit our changing times. Damned if the revolution ain't televised and broadcast far and wide. Keep documenting all that sounds. Keep on speaking truth to power. Listen, love, lift up, survive. 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 Please survive. So that we can all get these hugs done when it's safe to do so again. Here's him to Hearn. Now, I unfortunately have to play my djembe very quietly tonight in order to not completely freak out my microphone, but help me pick up the slack with some energy if you don't mind. Just dance however you please wherever you are. Dancing in your soul counts just as much as dancing physically. You do what you need to do to celebrate with me. You can say your prayers, work your rights, burn your little candles day and night. You can shimmy till dawn to the pounding drums, but you best be ready when the horned one comes, yeah. Some of us have a fraught relationship with the divine masculine for reasons that are obvious to ourselves. Maybe we are recovering from an upbringing in the Abrahamic faiths. I may not look like it, y'all, but I come from a long line of Methodist ministers. Fortunately, they were good people who put love over doctrine. That is not the norm, and I wish to goodness that it were. I present this piece for our healing tonight and to honor all of us who aren't afraid to sometimes wear our horns on the outside, if you know what I mean. If you wake to the sound of a hunting horn, dancer ring in the gathering storm. If the solstice time, get your panties in a wad. It's just the coming of the horn god. He will call you out, make you sweat, give you a blessing that you never forget. So revel in the chase and let your heartbeat run. Blessed are the children of the horned one. Blessed are the children of the horned one. Yeah. This is on a CD that I have called Blessings. and I've made sure that that's available in the tip rewards tonight. Don't y'all worry. Hunter who tracks outside of time, guardian lord of ancient rhyme, brother stag in the musky glen, consort of the goddess in her woodland den. We call you forth as we make our way, walking in your power every day. Guide us through in the hunt this night, and maybe even later in the great right. He will call you out, make you sweat, give you a blessing that you never forget. So revel in the chase and let your heart beat run. Blessed are the children of the Horn One. Blessed are the children of the Horn One. If you wake to the sound of a hunting horn, you dance to bring in the gathering storm. Revel in the chase and let your heartbeat run. But you best be ready, little one. You best be ready when the Horn One comes. It's gonna call you out, make you sweat, give you a blessing that you never forget. So revel in the chase and let your heartbeat run. Blessed are the children of the Horn One. Blessed are the children of the Horn One. Blessed are the children of the Horn One. Who's your daddy? Thank you all for being part of this magic tonight. I do have a drum under here. She's wearing a shawl so that she's muted a bit so I don't freak out my tech with the big boom of the sound. A little bit of a PSA. I am pre-recorded this evening because of the realities of my poor little pokey rural internet service. There's no competition. It's just this one company. And it was unreliable before we all started sheltering in place and working from home. So I pre-record in order to avoid inevitable lag and glitches. Thank you all for your understanding. One thing it does allow me to do is time travel and be a little bit of a witchy pixie time lord, because I'm singing to you in this moment. Well, not in this moment, but you know what I mean. And also hanging out with you in the chat, which I also love to do. So hooray for taming this particular lightning to our will, and hooray for all of the witchy event organizers who have been making their minds up to adapt and still give us ways to connect with each other and be together during this weird time. Here's a song that lends itself very well to ritual, or perhaps it's a ritual that lends itself very well to song. A lot of y'all know this. Sing along if you feel like it. You're safe to do so with me. This is Witch's Rune. What a joy it is to hang out with y'all this evening. Thank you for making time for us. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Darksome night and shining moon, balance of the dark and light. Hearken ye our witches' rune as we perform our sacred rite. By earth and water, air and fire, by blade and bowl and circle round, we come to you with our desire. Let all that is hidden now be found. With censer, candle, book and sword, and ringing of the altar bell, we tie a knot within our cord to bind our magic in a spell. yeah we do. Ooh. Mother of the summer fields, goddess of the silver moon, join with us as power builds, dance with us our witches rune. Father of the summer dew, hunter of the winter snows, with open arms we welcome you, dance with us as power grows. Oh, dance with us, our witches rune. Ay, 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 ay. Dance with us, our witches rune. Ay, 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 ay. Dance with us, our witches rune. Mother of the summer fields, goddess of the silver moon, join with us as power builds, dance with us, our witches rune. Father of the summer dew, hunter of the winter snows, with open arms we welcome you, dance with us as power grows. Oh, oh, dance with us, our witches rune. Dance with us, our witches rune. However y'all danced just now, thank you for doing that. I felt it. Ooh, ooh, ooh. By all the light of moon and sun, by all the might of land and sea, chant the rune and it is done. As we will, so mote it be. If you fired some magic off during that song just now, may it go just as you planned. And if you just laid back and relaxed, may that go just as you planned and serve you just as well. For everybody paying attention and doing your best to amplify the voices that need amplifying after so much time being ignored, disenfranchised, unduly harmed, and silenced. I believe in you. Try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Tina's just a little girl, but she opened up a portal to another world with the chalk on the sidewalk. With the chalk on the sidewalk. Even while drawing that very first line, she laid out the treasures of a beautiful mind with the chalk on the sidewalk. In the chalk on the sidewalk. Flying fish in a coastal cove, a map to the pirate's treasure trove with the chalk on the sidewalk. Yeah, in the chalk on the sidewalk. Always encourage the mind of a child. Imagination is meant to run wild with the chalk on the sidewalk. Yeah. With the chalk on the sidewalk, everybody sing. Try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Keep the magic on our side. Try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Let's make it safe to play outside. For them, I see my friends and neighbors in the whole design, not templates for a police outline. In the chalk on the sidewalk. in the chalk on the sidewalk. See, I believe in their rights to stand up, to be heard and answered, to not end up in the chalk on the sidewalk. Just a body in the chalk on the sidewalk. Can't breathe in the chalk on the sidewalk. Down in Houston with a clock on the sidewalk. Come on. Love thy neighbor still applies, regardless of creed. Compassion must rise, or else what will we be in our children's eyes but the very same monsters we claim to despise? Little kids ain't throwing shade when they show us the truth in the art that they made with the chalk on the sidewalk. Yeah, in the chalk on the sidewalk. Tina's just a little girl, but give her some room, she can change the world with the chalk on the sidewalk. It all starts with the chalk on the sidewalk. Everybody sing, try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Let's keep the magic on our side. Try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Let's make it safe to play outside for them. Gonna sing, try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Let's keep compassion on our side. Oh, try to paint a picture with your eyes wide open. Let's make it safe to play outside for them. For all our kiddos and all who teach them, may we be building a world that is worthy for them to inherit. Confession time. I believe in magic, and I am a magical practitioner. If that wasn't obvious up to this point, I'll just put it in plain terms. And I like to hang out with other people who feel and do the same. The team of storytellers and indie filmmakers who has put together the Strowlers World and the Strowlers series, which you can check out on the Fantasy Network online and also on Amazon Prime Video, believes the same, that magic is out there and it's for everybody. And that's how they tell their stories, about folks with magical abilities just finding out who they are and realizing that the world is not necessarily safe for them. Sound a little bit familiar? This next song is called Mirror Self. It was inspired by and licensed for the Strowlers series pilot episode, which again you can watch on the Fantasy Network or on Amazon Prime Video. I do not recommend learning this one and singing it in front of a mirror unless you really mean it, because the spell is in there, so be careful. Mirror self, reflect my face, hear my words, take my place. Breath and blood will make you whole. You have my heart and I my soul. Mirror self, reflect my face, hear my words, take my place. Breath and blood will make you whole. Take my heart and leave my soul. Wolves know their work, so be ready, ready to run and hide. Is this the magic mirror? Vanish the tail and decide between the worlds, to and fro, hand in hand, it's time to go. Never fear, my mirror girl, step by step between the worlds. Wolves know their work, so be ready to split yourself in two. Trust in the tale that you carry. Step on through. Oh, mirror self, reflect my face. Hear my words and take my place. Breath and blood will make you whole. Take my heart and leave my soul. Mirror self, now, hear me now. You have my heart, I have my soul. Breath and my blood will make you whole. Mirror self, reflect my face. Hear my words, take my place. Breath and blood will make you whole. Take my heart, leave my soul. Mirror self, reflect my face. Hear my words and take my place. Take my place. Take my place. Take my place. Here's our fight song for neurodiversity, and for those of us who feel we might just belong more in Wonderland than we do on this side of the mirror sometimes. Cheshire Kitten, folks. I grew up seeing things a little differently, appearing, disappearing, hardly innocent, nor tied down to the ground. I learned to roll and tumble with the punches, glory in my stripes and spots, walk by invisible and never make a sound. But heavy is the crown that's always hidden, tender is the heart you never see. Hard and fast shines the grin that we flash, but there's a vulnerable stripe but do on me. Maybe any place outside of Wonderland is not for me, my friend. If I leave my grin behind, remind me that we're all mad here, and it's okay. Sun up, sun down, the shadows hide me down in Wonderland. Wonderland, nobody knows the way, but if you find it in your dreams, you can find it at your day job, somewhere south of hell. Take the path to left or right with just your gut to guide you. The story is not for anyone else to tell. Go down the rabbit hole and out the other side. You can't go home in the middle of the magic carpet ride. You gotta greet the sun before his lovely daughter moon. You can't forsake the journey for the safety of your room until you learn your lesson well. I have learned to see and hear everybody loud and clear, but the truth comes down in riddles that are safe enough to share. That's how it is in songs, you see, and stripes always look good on me, whether or not I'm really there. But heavy is the burden of the wise ones when no one understands a word they say. The Jabberwock never bothered anyone, but nobody believes her to this day. Hey, and why should they? If I leave my grin behind, remind me that we're all mad here, and it's okay. Sun up, sun down, the shadows find me out in Wonderland. Wonderland, nobody knows the way, but if you find it in your dreams, you can find it at your day job, somewhere south of hell. Take the path to left or right with just your gut to guide you. The story is not for anyone else to tell. Go down the rabbit hole and out the other side. You can't go home in the middle of the magic carpet ride. You gotta greet the sun before his lovely daughter moon. You can't forsake the journey for the safety of your room until you learn your lesson well. Learn your lesson well. Learn your lesson well. Is it the stripes or the spots you see? Was it hearts or diamonds, baby, brought you here to me? Darling, you know better than to trust a pack of cards. What have we learned? The world is never as mad as it could be. Never as mad as it could. Hey, if I leave my grin behind, remind me that we're all mad here, and it's okay. If I leave my grin behind, remind me that we're all mad here, and it's okay. If I leave my grin behind, remind me that we're all mad here, and it's I'm not here to rush things along, but winter solstice will be here before we know it. So let's warm up to celebrate the chilly nights together. Now comes the solstice night. I wish you safe and sound, whether snow be light or heavy on the ground. Our hearts bring back the light, as all the earth must do. May stars fill up our sight with wishes coming true. My wish this solstice night is grace and peace to you. Now comes the time of year when shadow yields the throne. Lords of oak and holly, the dance that must be done. Keep faith and keep your candle. The sun is sure to rise o'er the sleepy fields of winter, bringing beauty to our eyes. Shalom to you now. Shalom, my friend. May bliss and beauty bless you, my friend. In all your living and through your loving, winter heart and home, be your own shalom. Little something from the Methodist hymnal that I grew up with, except I needed to borrow it and shift it just a little bit to the witchy side. Hope y'all don't mind. Upon this solstice night, I wish you safe and sound, whether snow be light or heavy on the ground. Our hearts bring back the light, as all the world must do. May stars fill up our sight with wishes coming true. My wish this solstice night is grace and peace to you. I wish this solstice night is grace and peace to you. Grace and peace to you. Grace and peace to you. That one is at music.sjtucker.com as a single. And as we get closer to the solstice itself, I will be sharing it around on social media, so y'all will be able to find it. Don't worry. I'm going to leave you all tonight with one more tune from Strowlers. This is Burn Me Out, the Strowlers anthem that I composed at the request of my buddy, the series creator, Ben Dobbins, after he and I had a long talk about the fact that the folks who have hope left when things get really, really bad will be the ones who have community that they can count on. And I'm looking at y'all right now. As burned out as we may be in this turbulent year, we can still tame the lightning, and the magic is still in us and still with us. Here comes your part. Burn me out, draw the lightning down, stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. Burn me out, draw the lightning down, stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. Go on and burn me out, catch me if you can, I'm gonna draw the lightning down. Coming strong or weak, stand and face your equal, and we'll turn this world around. Yeah, burn me out, draw the lightning down. Sing along wherever you are. Stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. Call me an outcast, call me a thief, close your eyes to my whole magic show. Turn away from what I have to say. The powerless have powers you will never know. We're all just storytellers, dreaming out loud to pass the time. I know my enemy shares my same fragility, but if you got the spark, you're bound to get far. Burn me out, catch me if you can, I'm gonna draw the lightning down. Coming strong or weak, stand and face your equal, we'll turn this world around. Call me a criminal for what I hold inside. Behind your eyes, you know we are the same. Problem child or spirit of solution, revolution doesn't need a lot of flame. Call on the storyteller, what's in the cards for you? I know the choice is clear, compassion over fear, for the magic we can do. Go on and burn me out, catch me if you can, I'm gonna draw the lightning down. Coming strong or weak, stand and face your equal, we'll turn this world around. Here we go, here comes your part. Burn me out, draw the lightning down, stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. Call me an outcast, call me a thief, close your eyes to my whole magic show. Turn away from what I have to say. The powerless have powers you will never know. If you don't have the spark, you'll never see fire, but we got the match right here. Let the world awake, make no mistake, we will still be standing when the smoke has cleared. Burn me out, catch me if you can, I'm gonna draw the lightning down. There's only one right, if we're gonna survive, we gotta turn this world around. Yeah, we may be out of focus, but we're proud to let it show. We stand without the burning, and we do not care who knows. Try to kill what's beautiful, stand back and watch it grow. Got a different kind of burning, and we do not care. Oh, renegades and rascals, we are all the same as you. Standing up for magic and the magic we can do. Try to hide the mystery, it's gonna shine through. We're standing up for magic and the magic we can do, yeah. Draw the lightning down, here we go, last chance. Burn me out, draw the lightning down. Stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. Voices only burn me out, draw the lightning down. Stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. That is it for me, magical people. Thank you for your time, your energy, your attention. Please go and donate to GreenSong tonight or anytime that you are able. As you are able, help them keep the dream alive. I will see you all in festival space as soon as we are safe to be face to face. I speak this, my fondest wish, and off it goes. In the meantime, everything you heard me sing tonight is available at music.sjtucker.com, and you can listen for free before you make a purchase of a download or order a CD from me. You could order my kids' book there as well, based on the song of the same name, Rabbit Song. Everything that I've got, I ship personally from my house if you order it from that link down there. And so I will send it to you with love and care, no matter what the pandemic has to say about the speed or lack thereof of the mail. Now, if you have the budget for this and you would like to hear the new stuff before the rest of the world does, go to patreon.com/sjtuckermusic and make yourself a pledge. You'll be helping me not only keep the music going, but keep my little family fed. And I thank you in advance. Also, search around for your other GreenSong Changemaker presenters and performers. There are quite a number of us on Patreon, and of course, we all love to send you goodies in exchange for your support. Last but not least, please allow me to invite all of you to the other online shows that I have coming up so that we can do all of this again. December 27th, I will appear at onlineconcertthing.com, which hosts all of my online shows going forward. I will be sharing the 27th with Tuatha Dea, so I particularly don't want you to miss that one because it's going to be a real barn burner. And then January 24th, 2021, I will be sharing a concert with my friend, the poet Kat Hetherington from New Mexico. I hope to see you in a chat on a screen again very soon. Please stay as safe as ever you can, everybody. We are the light. We are the change. It is so. Thank you.
It was marvelous, Suze. It always is. People out there, remember the auction at GreenSongFestival.com. Remember that we will be here next week and for several more weeks. I thank you. I'm delighted to be with you. And Grandmother Elspeth says, good evening.
Again, the magic we can do. Try to hide the mystery, it's gonna shine through. We're standing up for magic, and the magic we can do, yeah. Draw the lightning down, here we go, last chance. Burn me out, draw the lightning down. Stand up, face your equal, turn this world around. Voices only burn me out, draw the lightning down.